Hello everybody, I do believe we're live again. This is Neil at Recyke Bike in Byker on Greenburn Streets. This is the second of a series of basic bike maintenance instruction videos we're doing. The first one last month, I think, the days are just merging now, I'm starting to lose track. The first one was just a general overview of how to look after and check what might be wrong with your bike. This one's a bit more detailed. We asked for comments and suggestions about what you would like to see today, and the majority of what people asked for was gear adjustments. Specifically, front derailleur adjustments. Now, that's fine, I can do those. I might not have time today because before you do your front gear adjustment, you really want to make sure that your rear derailleur is adjusted properly. So we're going to start with back wheel, getting the back wheel in and out. We're going to look at different settings that you see on the rear derailleur, and then we're going to put a new gear cable in, check the settings and set the adjustment on the gears. There's going to be a bit of terminology today. It's quite basic terminology, but there is going to be some description of gears and how they work. So bear with us. Send a comment through if you need anything explaining again. We'll try our best to answer them. But one of the first comments we got yesterday was, which gear should you be in when you take your back wheel out of the bike? You'd always be in this smallest gear on the back wheel. So just select your gear lever and move your gears all the way to the smallest gear. Undo the quick release and the wheel should just lower out. Now I'll do that again a few times so you can see what happened there. But just to describe the terminology of the gears. This small cog at the back we call high gear. This is the highest gear. And the big one is your low gear. And it's this small one you change it beyond when you're putting your wheel in and out of the frame. The low gear, we get lots of questions about which gear you should be in when you're riding your bike. The low gear, if you relate that to your car, is something like first or second. This gear is something that can help you pull away easy. It's something that you can, a gear you can get into if you need to climb up an incline. As you get further down the freewheel or the cassette, you get to the higher gears, you get to the smaller gears. The smaller gears are what you would probably in your car be something like 4th or 5th gear, 6th gear if you've got a nice car. These gears are harder to pedal in, but they will be a faster gear. But it's that small gear you need to be in. You need to be in your high gear for putting the wheel in and out of the frame. To put a wheel into the back of a bike, you're trying to aim this little quick release into the middle of this chain. So it's just a case of getting the wheel in the middle, so one bit of chain above, one bit of chain below. You put the chain on the smallest gear, that's the highest gear. You may need to pull this derailleur back, and as you pull this back, you lift it up. While you're lifting it up, this wheel has a disc on it, so I'm trying to also get that disc to go in between the brake pads. And it should, fingers crossed, just slip into the dropouts like that. Once it's in the dropouts, do your quick release up. So go through that again. Put your chain onto the smallest gear, that's the highest gear, the smallest sprocket. Undo your quick release, and your wheel should, by gravity, just want to fall out. Pull the derailleur back, and your wheel should just come out. When you've got your wheel out, it's always a good idea just to see how smooth the hub bearings are. They feel nice and smooth. If there was a little bit of play on there, or if they felt a little bit tight, then it's a good opportunity to delve into the hub bearings and have a look at them. But for the purpose of this course, we're just going to put this wheel back in. We're going to do hub bearings another time. This is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-speed Shimano cassette with 3 chain rings on the front. So to put this back in, again, we're aiming for between the top of the chain and the bottom of the chain. Put the top of the chain on the smallest gear, lift it into the frame, and it should go in. The ends on this frame, these are frame ends, and these particular type of frame ends are called dropouts. And these particular type of dropouts are called vertical dropouts because they are vertically up and down. You also get horizontal dropouts. So when you undo a quick release lever on this type of bike with a vertical dropout, it will tend to drop straight out. So make sure you've got a hold of the wheel before you undo the quick release lever, because it will just bounce out if you're not careful. Because it's got vertical dropouts, when you put your wheel in, it can be very easy to get your wheel not straight. So you could end up closer to one side of the frame than the other side of the frame. So when you're putting your wheel in, always be at the back, and you can see down the bike. So your wheel should be in the centre of your frame. It should just run up the centre of the seat pin there. Put it in and do the quick release lever. And it should spin nicely like that. Right. If you ever have difficulty putting your wheel in, I often find that these little springs on the quick release levers, you have a little spring, there you go, either side on the quick release, these little springs here. Their only job in life is to push these ends out over when you undo the quick release lever, just to make it easier to get the wheel in and out. And they need to go on with the smaller end of the spring onto the quick release first. On this side, go on with the lever, you put the large side on, so the small side of the spring is facing in over. And on this side, when you put it in to the hub, you put the spring with the small side on the inside, and then put that on like that. Sometimes I see people who have put springs that way on. I'll just drop my spring. There you go. Frantically got another spring. I see people putting the springs with the thicker end on first. I don't know if you can see, but that actually covers the end of the axle. And when you try and put this into your frame, it won't go into the dropout. So always make sure, it's just a tiny little detail, but always make sure the smaller part of the spring faces in over on both sides. Again, aim for the middle of the chain. Put the chain on the smallest sprocket, the highest gear, and it should slide straight in. That's your wheel in. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to sabotage this bike. I'm just going to cut the gear cable. There you go. So I now have a snapped gear cable Nothing clicking the lever is going to move this gear at all. This bike's a bit dead, it needs a new gear cable put in. So, if you do this in a certain process, you should address everything you need to address before you get to fastening the cable in. There's a few things you need to check beforehand. I'll just get rid of this old cable. All you probably need for this task is a 5mm Allen key and maybe a pair of pliers just to hold the cable. Okay, right, so I'm just going to fiddle with a few things and then we'll show you how to fix a few things. Right then, so very first thing to do before you put a new gear cable in, if you're having trouble with the gears, you need to check that your rear derailleur, this bit on the back of the bike, this is called a rear derailleur. Some people call this a rear mech. They call it a mechanism or a rear mechanism, a derailleur, a rear derailleur. Some people call it an S-piece. This is called a derailleur because it derails your chain from one gear to the next. The chain on a bike has to be a certain length to accommodate all the different size gears that you have. So sometimes you're on small chain rings like that, and your chain has to have some tension. Sometimes you're on large gears like that, and you have to have enough chain to do that, and again you need tension. So your rear derailleur has a spring in it, which tensions the chain, but allows the chain to move between different gears. So, first thing to do is do a visual check that your derailleur is perfectly up and down under the highest gear. All the gear adjustments, when you put your gear cable on the rear derailleur, you're doing everything to start with on the smallest sprocket, the highest gear. If you're happy that your derailleur is straight up and down, then we'll move on. If your derailleur wasn't straight, sometimes because this part is at the back of the bike and it's quite exposed, it can get bent easily. So if your derailleur gets bent in over, it won't be perfectly under your gears, so you'll probably get a lot of chattering from your gears won't change properly, you'll probably get a lot of noise from your gears. So always check that your gear hangs straight up and down. I've just said on your wheel you've got a high gear and you've got a low gear. And on your derailleur, don't know if you can see this, there's two screws at the back there. One's marked with an H for high and one's marked with an L for low. And those two screws are your limit screws. They limit how far your derailleur moves. If your limit screws are in the wrong place, it may come off the side of the high gear. It can also go over the top of the low gear and into your spokes. So as I've just done there, that's going into the spokes. So if it's going too far past low gear, you need a small screwdriver and you go to the screw marked L. And my eyesight is terrible, but there you go. And you just give those half turn at a time. It's still going over. So I'll give it a bit more turn. And I'm screwing this screw in, which is going to limit the movement of the derailleur towards the low gear. A little bit more, nearly there. So I can push that derailleur onto the low gear now, and I'm not going over the top. So the low gear, the L screw is in the right position. Also do the same with the H screw for the high gear, and make sure that the derailleur sits nicely under the high sprockets. And it's trying to jump there. So I'll just undo that a bit more. A little bit more. So it's on the high gear, and it's nice and clean, it's not making any noises, it's not jumping. And I can push it all the way to the low gear, and it's not going over the top. And it comes all the way back down to the high gear. So I've got my full range of gears, and my derailleur is straight up and down. So we should now be able to just go ahead and fit a new gear cable. I'll get rid of the old gear cable first. Every type of gear lever has a different method for getting gear cables in and out. I'll have to do a separate video, I'll just record one and put it on YouTube, showing you how to get gear cables into the most common gear levers. There must be, off the top of my head, at least 6 different types of lever, all with 6 different types of method of how to put a gear cable in. These Shimano ones, these STI levers, are quite easy because the cable just goes in at the side. So here's the new cable. Just unwind that. There's only maybe 3 different types of cable you can get on a bike. Gear cables, no matter what bike, road bike, mountain bike, hybrid bike, gear cables are generally all the same. You have a small little end on the cable. That only changes on certain maybe Campagnolo gears where the end is the same, it just gets a bit smaller. But generally if you go somewhere and ask for a gear cable for a bike, you should be able to get the right cable. We only do rear gear cables, so if you were fitting the one to the front, just put a rear in, you just have a little bit more excess to cut off. So we don't sell specifically front or rear, as all rears. Right, so I'm just going to thread this back in, which can be a little bit fiddly. There you go, it's in. And just pull that all the way through and give it a tug, and that should be well seated in there. Right, cables, outer cables, just give you a brief. Let's have a look. There you go. Right. Bikes have 2 types of outer cable. They have a gear cable outer and a brake cable outer. And they're subtly different, so if you were replacing the outer cable as well, you need to get gear cable outer if you were replacing a gear cable. The difference is, this is gear cable, and the inner strands, I've cut away a section here, and the inner strands run in line with the gear cable. And that makes the cable quite stiff and rigid. This is brake cable. I don't know if you can see, but instead of being the inner section straight, the inner section on brake cable is coiled, and that makes the cable very flexible. You don't want that on your gears. On your gears, you need to click one lever and move your derailleur 1 gear. If your outer cable had flex in it, all you would do when you click your gear lever, you would flex the cable a bit and your derailleur wouldn't move a full gear, so you would always have problems with your gears. So if you're replacing the outer cable, always make sure you're getting gear cable outer. gear cable inner should just slot, thread through your outer cable. There you go. That goes into the lever, and that goes on your frame. Now on this bike, the gear cable goes along the top of the top tube and down the seat stay. On some bikes, they come down the down tube and go under a guide, under your bottom bracket, and then along the bottom of your chainstay. But this designer has decided to put them across the top tube. So there's a little bit of cable here to get you around that little junction. So just thread it through. Put that cable back. All these little bits on the frames have slots in them, so the cables can slot in and out easily. Right, we're down to this little back bit now. So again, just thread the cable through the outer, fit that into the frame. Right, this is where you start getting into the gear index adjustments. The derailleur has a little adjuster on the back. You can screw in or screw it out. The gear lever also has an adjuster. So when I'm setting gears, I tend to put them both a little bit in, a little bit out, because when you fasten the gear cable behind the screw, you may need to adjust your cable a little bit in or a little bit out. So if you have your adjuster screwed all the way in or all the way out, you're limiting the amount of adjustment you can put on the cable. So always have the adjuster a little bit in, a little bit out. So I'll just do that on that. Thread the cable through there. There you go. So far we've checked the derailleur straight up and down. We've checked the two limit screws, the high and the low, to make sure that the chain isn't going too far that way or too far that way. We've fitted the new gear cable in the lever, and we've fitted the inner cable through the outer cable all the way to the back of the frame. So now all we need to do is secure it in a derailleur. I'm trying not to block your view, but sometimes I just can't help it. So I just put index gears work on cable adjustments. If it's too slack, it won't change. If it's too tight, it'll change too many gears. So there's a little fine line of how tight you need to pull this cable. So I just put a little bit of pressure on and tighten the nuts. So that cable is now in the system and it's fastened in. So now we can go through the gears and see how close the indexing is. One click of this lever as I'm turning the pedals should move me one gear. Now you see, I'm not bragging, but that worked first time. That's what happens when you've been fitting gear cables for over 30 years. You just seem to get a feel for how tight to put the gear cable in. So, what I'll do is I'll purposely slacken it off a bit and show you how to adjust the gears. Right, there we go. Right, so this cable, see how I'm going to wiggle that? That cable now is far too slack. So when I click this lever, all I'm doing is removing the slack from the system. I'm not moving the derailleur a full gear. So to correct that, if I try to move the gears, it's noisy, it's trying to change, but it can't make the leap from one gear to the next because this cable is too slack. if you find that your chain, starting at the bottom, won't go to the next gear, if you stand at the back of the bike, the easy way to remember it is, if you want the chain to go that way, into the spokes, towards the spokes, sorry, you turn the adjuster towards the spokes. So what you're doing is you're undoing, screwing out the adjuster, which is putting tension in the cable, and I would only move it a quarter turn at a time. That's better, but it's still not working, so I'll just turn it another quarter turn. And that's all it needed. It just needed a half turn, just 2 quarter turns of the adjuster, and that was enough to take the slack out of the cable and allows one click to move one gear. If you've replaced your inner gear cable and you've checked your derailleur and everything's straight, and you've checked the limit screws and everything's adjusted right, and your gear still can't be adjusted, it could be that you need to change the outer cable. This inner cable needs to run. You can see how smooth that is, running back and forward. Sometimes your inner cable will corrode inside the outer cable. Bikes get rained on, they get wet, water makes its way into the cable, and sometimes you just get drag on that system. So when you're physically pushing the gear lever to go that way, when you come back down to your high gears, you're relying on the friction or the lack of friction to go down over. But if you've got friction in the system, your gear will just hang and it won't jump back down the gears. So if you think you've got everything right, if you think you've got a new cable, everything's set on the back, and you still can't change your gears, it could be that you need to change your outer cable. One other thing that affects gear performance is the condition of your chain. We get a lot of bikes into Recyke Your Bike, and people bring them in thinking they're just going to have a quite simple repair, but it turns quite expensive. It turns expensive because people don't change this chain. The chain is something you change often. If you've got, for instance, an 8-speed bike, a new chain is £10. If you've got a 9-speed bike like this, it's £18. So changing this chain twice a year costs you £36. If you don't change your chain, you could end up in a situation where you need to change your chain, your cassette, and also your chain set, because as this chain wears, it stretches and it deforms the shape of the teeth on the cassette, and it deforms the shape of the teeth on the chain set. If you fitted a new chain, it wouldn't run in the deformed teeth of the cassette and the chain set, and it would slip. As you put pressure on the pedals, your chain would slip over, and you're in a situation where you are at least £150 plus up over, because your chain has been worn to excess, you didn't change it often enough, and you've worn out the cassette and the chain rings. For a couple of pounds, a good tool to add to your toolkit is a chain checker. A chain checker used regularly will tell you the condition of your chain. You put it onto your chain and you see if it falls in. So this little hook part goes on your chain, and you see if this little hook here falls into the chain. One end is marked 0.75% and one end is marked 1%. It's quite basic, it's just an indicator, but if you put the 0.75% bit on your chain, and it drops in all the way, it's telling you need a new chain. Your chain's stretched, you need a new chain. If it doesn't fall in, your chain should be okay. But if it falls in, you need a new chain. If you then turn it over to the 1% side, put it in, and if this hook falls in your chain, you also need to replace your cassette. If the 1% side doesn't fall in, then it's just a chain you need. So I think those tools range from about £2 to £8, and it's really worthwhile having one in your toolkit. Measuring the chain, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which chain ring you're on to measure your chain. You just put the little loop onto the chain and see if that falls in. It doesn't, because this is a new chain. If you have an old chain, that could well fall into your chain. But it doesn't matter what gear you're in, all you're doing is measuring how far your chain is actually stretched over time. Most people don't actually believe your chain stretches because they think it's metal, and metal doesn't stretch, but it does stretch. It doesn't stretch much, but it does stretch. The last thing to do with your gears is just to get rid of all this excess, because this will just get tangled into your gears. So just snip it, and you can get little aluminium ends that you can push onto the end to stop the end from fraying. Perfectly changed gear table. Took roughly half a turn in the adjuster to get it adjusted. So that's covered putting the wheel in and out of the bike. Always start off on the small gear, the highest gear. Undo your quick release lever, drop it out. When you come to put it back in, put it into the middle of the chain, put the chain onto the high gear, and lift it into the frame, and fasten your quick release. And you should find that your gears, because your wheel's gone into the exact same position, your brakes work without rubbing, and your gears change without clamping. Right, got a little bit of time left to have a look at the front derailleur. The front derailleur is a bit more complicated. It has a few more settings you need to check. So I always do the front derailleur second, because I need the chain up here in the low gear. So I need the rear gears done first before I do the front gear. The front derailleur usually clamps around this tube, and because that tube's circular, you need to make sure that your front derailleur is in line with the chain set. Some people clamp the front derailleur on and it's out of line, and it also needs to be in a certain height above the teeth of your chain set. So it's difficult to see, but I'll do some more close-up videos, and I'll put the close-up videos on YouTube. But the top of your teeth and the bottom part of the front derailleur, there should be a small gap. Most manufacturers recommend between 2 and 3 millimeters between the bottom part of that derailleur and the top of the teeth on the outer chain set. There's a little nut on the side. You can undo the clamp and you move your derailleur up or down. But you want it, if you can, 2 or 3 mil above the top of the chain set. You then need to make sure that this outer cage of your derailleur is in line with the outside level edge of the chain set. So if that's your chain set, your derailleur needs to be perfectly in line. Not like that, not like that, perfectly in line with just a small gap between them. Not too big and not so that it's touching the top of the chain set. Once you've got the height and the angle, you also, on your front derailleur, have the two limit screws. You have a high and a low. On the front derailleur, the whole world of gears is turned round. So on the front, the small chain ring becomes the low gear, and the bigger chain ring becomes the high gear. So I start by setting the low limit screw. So that's the chain as far over on the frame as you can get it. So on the big sprocket at the back and the small sprocket on the front puts your chain as far over the side of the bike as you can get it. And you need to adjust the low adjustment screw so that the inner part of this cage is just off, tinkling on the side of the chain. So when you turn the pedals like that, if I just screw the low adjuster screw in, it's rubbing like that. So if I screw it out, there you go, it's stopped rubbing. There's now a little bit of a clearance between the chain and the inner part of the gear. I do the same thing. I set the adjuster half in, half out, and I clamp the gear cable. And then click one lever, and it should change nicely and cleanly into the middle chain ring. Sometimes the chain might rub on the gear. If you can picture your bike, you've got a whole set of 9 gears or 10 gears or even 11, 12 gears at the back, and you've only got 2 or 3 at the front. So when you're changing gear, the back part of your chain is moving like that, and it's running through a very narrow part on your front derailleur. So as your chain is running between high and low, your chain is going to be catching either on this side or this side. Sometimes you can't get rid of that little catching noise, but you can try and adjust it out. So if your chain was catching on the inside, it's probably a sign that your cable is too tight. And you just need to turn the adjuster in a quarter of a turn. That'll put some slack into the gear cable and move the derailleur in slightly and move it away from the chain. Now, I'm on the high gear and I'm on the big chain ring, so the chain's as far over this way as it can be, and it's rubbing slightly on the outer chain plate of the derailleur, which means I might need to put a little bit of tension into the system. So I'll turn the adjuster out a quarter turn at a time, and that puts tension into the cable and moves the adjuster slightly off the chain. Which it's done, so that's not making a noise now. The front derailleur is very temperamental. It's a fine line on cable tension on a front derailleur. If you're having problems with the front derailleur, what I would suggest doing is stripping it back out to basics, putting a new inner cable in and a new outer cable, and be confident that you've got new cables. Then anything that's not working is down to the adjustment, the alignment of the derailleur, the adjustment of the 2 limit screws, and the adjustment of the adjuster on the gear lever. Any more questions? Loads of spam. Someone's trying to hack our Facebook Live this afternoon. We don't know why, but they've been trying all week to spoil this, but Sarah's on the laptop and does not let it happen. Right, well, I think... about bottom brackets. Bottom brackets. What's the question about bottom brackets? Is there a question? Because there's lots of things I can talk about. Pedals, easy. Good question. what you need to change pedals is a good pedal spanner. A lot of pedals have flats on the pedal. They're generally 15mm. This tool from Park can usually get any pedal out of any bike. Now it's a good question because there's different threads on different pedals. So let's just take that one out. Right, you have specifically a right-hand pedal and a left-hand pedal. They both have different threads. It confuses a lot of people. A lot of people have been buying bikes in boxes and bringing them in bits for us to assemble the bike. And quite often they're having issues with pedals and they don't understand why. And the issue is the right-hand pedal. The right-hand pedal that goes on the chainset side has a normal thread. It just screws in normally. The left-hand pedal has an opposite thread. It screws in the way you would normally screw something out. Some pedals are marked with an L and an R. Some pedals aren't. You can, if you look at the threads, you can see which thread has the normal thread, and that goes in to the chainset side of the bike. The other pedal will just not screw into that side, so if you force it, you will almost certainly damage the thread in this chainset, and you're leaving yourself with either an expensive replacement or a moderately expensive repair to fit a thread insert into that crank. So make sure you're confident which pedal goes into which crank, and that one should just screw in, which it does. And that must mean, by process of elimination, that must be the other side. So that screws in the other direction, the way you would normally screw something out. Now if you have a work stand and a pedal spanner, putting pedals in is a breeze. It's just a case of winding them back. There we go. And then a little bit of pressure with the pedal spanner, and they're in. Some pedals don't have the flats. They have an Allen key fitting on the inside of the pedal. Pretty obvious to spot, but you will need a good size Allen key for putting those pedals in. The pedals are quite straightforward as long as you get the right pedal into the right crank. I'm just about done for tonight unless there's any more questions.
Only big, massive questions that might have to do with it.
Big, massive questions that I probably won't be able to answer in 20 seconds. That's it. I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope I've answered some questions. Someone is desperately trying to bang on our shutters and get in. We don't know who it is. Local kids probably. But that's the end of the basic bike maintenance number 2. That's 45 minutes. I've got a clock on the desk there, and that's flown over. We will plan a third one. We will ask you for your questions beforehand so we can plan the session to answer the questions that you've got. But that's been it. Hope you've enjoyed it. As ever, we rely on bike donations, and the COVID-19 situation and the lockdown has really limited the bikes that we're getting donated. So if you do have bikes hanging around that aren't getting used, please bring them down to Recyke Bike because we can repurpose them. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday and Saturday between 12 and 2 we'll happily accept any donations of bikes that you have. We also rely on donations of money. So if you have the means and the ability, get onto our website. There's a donation button there, and we would really appreciate any donation financially that you can also make as well. But I hope you've enjoyed that. I have. My mouth's very dry. I need a drink. It's been 46 minutes of just talking about gears. Next time, let's talk about something different. Bottom brackets, wheels, hubs, brakes, you name it, we'll talk about it. But that's it for now. Thank you very much. I'll see you later. Thank you. Bye.